Hello, and welcome to Biz Analytics Lab, your host for today's deep dive into the world of business analysis and project management. Today, we're unraveling the mysteries of one of the most essential tools in a business analyst's toolkit, the Business Requirement Documentation, or BRD. Now, you might be wondering, why should I care about BRD? Well, my friends, you are in for a treat because the BRD is like the compass that guides us through the turbulent seas of project management and business analysis. It's the key to turning ambitious ideas into tangible realities, ensuring projects stay on track, and helping businesses thrive. But fear not. In this video, we won't just tell you what a BRD is, we'll show you how to create one. We're going to provide you with a step-by-step guide. Whether you're a seasoned business analyst or just starting your journey in project management, this video is packed with valuable insights that will elevate your skills. Welcome back, guys. In this section, we're diving deep into the world of business requirement documentation, or as it's commonly known, the BRD. But what exactly is a BRD, and why is it such a crucial element in the project lifecycle? Let us find out. Imagine this: you are at the starting line of a brand new software project. You have a vision, a concept, but how do you turn that vision into a tangible reality? Well, that's where the BRD steps in. Let us say you're a software developer tasked with creating a mobile app for a client. The client wants an app that helps users order food from local restaurants. It sounds simple enough, right? But think about it. How do you ensure that the app does exactly what the client envisions? So, in essence, the BRD defines the what of your project. It sets the expectations, aligns your team, and ensures that everyone is on the same page. It's the first step in transforming an idea into a successful project. Now that we've grasped the concept of a BRD and its role, it's time to delve into its components. In the next section, we'll break down the key elements that make up a business requirement documentation. This is the first cover page. You can add a company logo. That's what I normally do. I usually add my company logo and then the author and version if possible, and then we go into the document revision history. As you know, sometimes when we go through the requirements, and as you attend different workshops, you can actually end up with more requirements from each of those sessions. So that's why we have to keep track of different types of documents and what kind of revisions have been made. Also, I'm not going to spend too much time here. If you are delivering this requirement document for a specific project, you can actually add more information here. But again, it's not necessary. You don't have to, but if you want to, then you can certainly add more information here. So the business requirements document is a major deliverable representing the achievement of the business analysis milestone in a project management. So it requires formal review and sign-off by the client acceptor or whoever is going to provide a sign-off. Who is going to represent the interests of the business area stakeholders under normal circumstances? The business requirements document is created by the senior business analyst who is delegated to a project. So the business requirements document template confirms some of the best practices and is the primary tool for structuring requirements. So gathering requirement activity is what we call it, and then interim feedback loops and approvals from the business stakeholders are going to be captured. And that's why I've mentioned before that there could be multiple versions as it goes through different iterations of approvals. Okay, so here is a table of contents. In this table of contents, we're going to start off with a brief. You know the introduction, so every document should have document approvers, requirement acceptance criteria, and then if there are any dependencies or relationships to other documents. Then it can also define the scope of the project as well as some of the participants and processes that we were talking about, right? What is the capacity? What is the speed? What is the availability? Right, so for one of my projects that I've implemented in the past, they would ask questions like, how long would it take to run payroll for 100,000 employees? Right, what is your speed and capacity? And I would also hear questions like, if it is your server going to crash, if we have thousands and thousands of people who are trying to log in at the same time, right? So these are some of the performance and quality standards that are sort of related to non-functional requirements. So it's really important for us to know who is going to say, yep, these are all the changes that we're going to be making, and we are good with that decision, right? So who is a key decision maker that can provide those approvals at the end of the day already? So this is sort of the preliminary before we get into the business process overviews. So as I mentioned before, that there is a current business environment, meaning what is your business process today? How do you do things? And you know what are the different types of business processes that we need to review that are going to be changed as a result of this project. So this would be the appropriate place to add swim lane diagrams. So oftentimes what I would do is I would add swim lane diagrams of the current business practices and the different stakeholders that are involved. So normally swim lane diagram would be preferred because it gives a very great visual of what your current business process should look like, and it can also have additional descriptions of current methods and procedures and equipments that are being used, or any inputs and outputs of volumes and frequency of the product or process that you want to change, right? So this is where you can sort of discuss the problem that you are having with your current business environment, and then the second section is really the to be or the future business environment or future business processes. Again, so this is going to be envisioned, future business process, so this is not how you do things today, but this is how you envision that it's going to change in the future. So again, it would be really great and beneficial to have a swim lane diagram. So then you can sort of do a quick comparison when you look at those two diagrams between as is versus to be, right? You know it's okay for you to not have a complete picture of what the to be process is gonna look like, because nobody knows exactly what is gonna happen tomorrow, but you should have a pretty good understanding by the time you write this document. You as a business analyst should have a pretty good understanding of some of the processes or structure or different policies that they're trying to implement as a result, and you should be able to, envision what those future processes should look like. Okay, and this will require, multiple iterations of workshops and understanding the different types of requirements. So you don't have to work on this right away. I mean, you can work on as is first, and then you can go and work on your other requirements section and then come back to the B. Just because it's under section 2 doesn't mean it has to be completed before you move on to the next section. Okay, here I have a note too. So the environment is not determined until design and the project plan is complete and approved. It is optional and not to be included in this business requirement document, and you can also include it in the design document at a later phase, so it sort of depends on you knowing the scope of the project. You will have to work with a project manager or with your supervisor or manager in order to determine whether or not you have the new to be business processes ready. Okay, and then you can also include key improvements and capabilities that are to be improved upon, or any kind of upgrades that are going to be made to an existing capabilities. Section 3 requirements would be the most critical part of the business requirements document, so obviously we're going to start off with the high-level business requirements of what the enterprise business goals, objectives, and benefits describe. Why the project initiated, what is the problem that we're trying to solve. At the end of the day, right, what is the problem or opportunity that we're trying to achieve, and what kind of solution is required, why is it required, and how are we going to achieve business objectives. At the end of the day, right, so this is sort of like a high-level business requirement. Okay, so the stakeholder requirements really focuses on who is right, so how are these particular stakeholders or stakeholder groups, how are they going to interact with the solution? What are the key functions that they need in order to use this? Your service or product rate, what does the product or service do? How do you expect to use a finished product or service? So this sort of goes back to asking the questions to those end users. And ask questions such as, how exactly are you going to use this interface or this report to help with your current business practices, right? So this comes right after the business requirements. Solution requirements is really to focus on identifying the characteristics that would meet the business and stakeholder requirements, right? and ask questions such as, how exactly are you going to use this interface or this report to help with your current business practices, right? So this comes right after the business requirements. Solution requirements is really to focus on identifying the characteristics that would meet the business and stakeholder requirements, right? So these will include some of the functional and non-functional requirements. That we're going to cover functional requirements. Let us say you're working on a project where you're trying to improve a system functionality, right? So if that's the requirement, then under the functional requirements, this is how you would define what that would look like, right? So requirement number 1 would be the system, right? So these are all the different types of functional requirements. So we're not necessarily proposing a solution or what it should look like, but we are saying these are the requirements that need to be checked off in order for us to say, yep, this is the end product that we want to see. So here you can also provide different types of diagrams of the system and the integration if it's going to be easier. So in this example, we are showing the data flow, right? This is a data flow diagram of how data flows between the main application or assists and then how it interacts with different interfaces that it's connecting with, right? That we want to see. So here you can also provide different types of diagrams of the system and the integration if it's going to be easier. So in this example, we are showing the data flow, right? This is a data flow diagram of how data flows between the main application or assists and then how it interacts with different interfaces that it's connecting with, right? If it helps, then by all means, I think it's best to sometimes include some of these visual diagrams to help with your explanation. And then there's also the reporting functionality that we always have to remember, especially in systems. We always are asked for specific functionality because we want to capture certain information and we want an output, right? So what are the measurement specific reports that they're looking for? Operational reports. What are the different types of documents or forms that we need at the end of the day? Those need to be captured as well, and there are some non-functional requirements, such as the performance or quality standards of this new system that we were talking about, right? What is the capacity? What is the speed? What is the availability? Right? So for one of my projects that I've implemented in the past, they would ask questions like, how long would it take to run payroll for 100,000 employees? Right? What is your speed and capacity? And I would also hear questions like, if it is your server going to crash, if we have thousands and thousands of people who are trying to log in at the same time, right? So these are some of the performance and quality standards that are sort of related to non-functional requirements.
Especially because of SOX compliance. So some of you who are in accounting will be familiar with SOX compliance, also known as Sarbanes-Oxley Act, to protect shareholders and then the general public from accounting errors and fraudulent practices in enterprises. So basically, we have to limit the amount of information that users can have within the system, right? So I cannot be the one submitting, a purchase order of $50,000 and also be the one who can approve it, because what if I am somebody who's trying to steal money from the company, right? So it's about having limited user access and permissions depending on their organizational hierarchy, and also ensuring that they are not the requester and approver at the same time, because that just gives them the ability to do whatever they want, right? So that's also an important part to consider. System architecture is really only involves if you are working with systems like myself, server configuration, deployment model, things like that. It really comes down, and it's only applicable if you are working on systems. So if you are working on other types of projects where it requires infrastructure standards and model and physical site layouts, etc., for construction companies or electrical, plumbing, mechanical, or any other trades, then, maybe this is something that you want to include in your requirements document for your construction projects, right? But like I mentioned before, you can take certain sections out because not everything is going to be applicable to you, and you should really customize it to meet your own needs. In terms of data, it's really critical for us to think about the standards and model, especially when it involves a project, a big capital project. It can actually involve multiple phases, where the phase 1 involves like database migration, and then the phase 2 is we're going to upgrade our system after the database migration. So in that case, we know that there is a dependency that we have with the data and then the database migration. So these are some of the key things that you need to take into consideration depending on the scope of the project. And then to see if there's any further integration. So depending on the size of the organization and the business area that you reside in, you can actually work with many different types of integration. For example, I work with SAP, sort of similar to what we saw here earlier in the data flow diagram. Like this would be SAP, and then this would be interface 1. It could be an interface that, people use to enter time entry, right? And then this could be another interface, and it could be like a benefits interface where people go to their website and then enroll for their benefits coverage, etc. So there could be multiple interfaces that really stem from one system, and then they can actually, send information back and forth, or they can just be one-sided, right? Like it doesn't have to come back all the time. So depending on the requirements, this can differ too. Okay, and this part is really about audit trails, and sometimes, especially when you're working on a system, you want to log all the changes that are made by different users because you don't know who you want to keep track of who deleted the records or made changes, right? So who is the last person who made the changes to this employee record? So if you want those audit trails, you sometimes have to ask for specific functionalities or requirements that need to be met, right? So, and then, what are we going to do if there is any error, right? Like if we're running something, if we're running a program, and then if it errors out, how are we going to handle those errors and how can we fix them? So this section is more related to systems, as you can see. So any backup recovery, fallback plans for systems application, database, or hardware, installation and startup procedures and timeframes that we need to also take into consideration. And then there is also the system maintenance. So what's the procedures going to look like after we implement this new system? What's going to be the time frame? What's going to be the priorities? Like, how are we going to deploy the new enhancements? How are we going to deploy the new regular system maintenance, right? So these are all the things that you also need to think about. And training and documentation for users and support teams is critical as part of change management to move and support them from their current normal to their new normal. So from their current as is to, what the future to be process is going to look like. And then the last section, environmental, it's really talks about corporate standards and different types of regulation and legislations that could be that could have an impact. But again, not necessary to have this. If safety is important aspect of your project, then you should definitely include a section about safety. And so basically that would be the end of the requirements section. And at the end, this transition requirements really focuses on how to help organization transition from current state to the future state of the business, right? So these are temporary in nature. So, once people are familiar with the new processes, they're not going to need it anymore, right? So this can be like a data conversion from one system to another, or this can be like a cheat sheet, or, some kind of documentation. This is just really to ensure that the transition is smooth and there is all the help that users are going to need in order to become familiar with the new norm. And this section under requirement dependencies really focus on some of the assumptions and constraints and any relationship to other projects that should be taken into consideration. So the reason why requirement dependencies are critical for you to capture is oftentimes it's outside your direct control, right? It's sometimes outside the project manager's direct control, and sometimes it's outside the scope of the project, but it can still influence the success of the project, right? So these dependencies can be internal or external, right? So right now there are a lot of uncertainty surrounding COVID, right? That's completely outside this project, but realistically, that factor can really influence the project timeline, right? For example, are we going to get our budget in time because of COVID, right? COVID introduced a whole new different checklist that people need to go through in order to get their budget approved. So, do you think that could be a constraint, right? So then you would probably write it down. And then, if there's any other existing project that's going on that could have a dependency on your project, then you should also list them as well. And then you should also write down some of these assumptions saying that, this is based on the following assumptions that were made while determining the requirements, because you can't capture everything, but you have to, at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and say that, this is what we have currently based on what we know. And that's why assumptions are critical. And at the end, you can have this appendices with terminology and then approval and sign off.
For those of you who watch the video until the very end, I have a small gift surprise for you. So just keep on watching. So before we begin, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is a template, and for your purposes, and for your organizational needs, you can actually customize it. Take out some of the sections that you don't think are necessary. So this is totally something you can work to make changes. It's not be all and all, but it does, and a lot of essential information and structure that you can begin to follow. As I promised earlier, there's a small surprise gift for you. So if you want to get a copy of this business requirements document, then do the following things. So first, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and second, make sure you follow me on my Instagram account, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and your email and Google form, and add comments below. I will send you a copy of this business requirements document template. Make sure to fill Google form so I can directly follow up you. And also, if you want me to make BRD reports, fill Google form and I will directly send my quotation for you.